My name is Lauren Padgett, and I initially got my undergraduate degree in elementary education and taught first grade for a year. Now I'm pursuing my master's degree in applied behavioral analysis at Ball State and currently live in downtown Chicago, Illinois, while finishing up school and participating in my fieldwork. My field placement is at a private multidisciplinary clinic downtown that services children age ranging from 2 to 6 diagnosed with ASD. Currently, in my location, my title is a training specialist, in which my role is to not only provide one on one therapy in clinical settings, but I also train new therapists that come into my clinic in order for them to implement ABA procedures with fidelity. As of right now, I plan to practice in the clinical setting, but I'm open to other options, specifically in schools. So, my own experience with behavioral assessments, I am very familiar with descriptive functional behavior assessments, particularly using indirect assessments and direct assessments in the form of ABC data collection. I have collected continuous ABC data for almost all of my clients I've worked with. I've also taken ABC data while observing other client therapist sessions with clients to use for later analysis of potential functions of behavior. I have never taken data using a scatter plot before, as it is not common at my clinical site. I've only participated in one functional assessment. A new BCBA started at my clinic recently, and she conducted one a couple of weeks ago. Previously, I had not heard of an FA being conducted at my site, so it was a really, really unique experience for me to get at the current placement I'm at. One of the biggest takeaways that I have from my own experience is that regardless of the method used to collect data, data needs to be collected in order to make evidence-based decisions regarding what the function of the behavior may be, potential antecedent and consequence manipulations, and appropriate alternative replacement behaviors for each client. Now that's a little bit about me. Next up, I'm going to be presenting my FBA and FA discussion. All right, so to start, when should you conduct a functional behavior assessment? Typically, a functional behavior assessment is conducted when there is a certain behavior or behaviors that require more support than what is currently being given. This could mean that there are antecedent and consequence strategies that may have been previously implemented that are maybe not working anymore or were not as successful as they needed to be. These behaviors are also commonly referred to as problem behaviors or target behaviors. And a functional behavior assessment is used to design behavior support plans that minimize problem behavior and maximize functional pro-social behavior, according to McIntosh 2007. In schools, it is looked through the lens of a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, that is used in schools to define the level of support a student may need, from Tier 1 to Tier 3, with Tier 3 being behavior that requires individualized behavior support, is often when the functional behavior assessment seems to be the most appropriate, according to Crone in 2015. Of course, it's also important to note it can be used at any time in which there is unclear function of behavior. It does not necessarily need to be in a Tier 3. So, problem behavior, what is it? A problem behavior is any behavior that presents a barrier to participation in the community and could make the individual less responsive to important learning opportunities and/or has the potential to cause harm to the learner or anyone else in the surrounding environment, according to Eli Rosel's 2018. Some behaviors that have been identified commonly as problem behaviors include self-injury, aggression, stereotypic behavior, while other typographies of problem behavior, such as, are but not limited to, elopement, feeding problems, and pica, according to the same source. It is important to note that not all of these behaviors will always constitute problem behaviors. Their topography has to match the criteria that we listed above in order for there need to be a behavior change. These problem behaviors then are analyzed with different assessments, and for the purpose of this discussion, we will be focusing on FA and FBAs, functional assessments and functional behavior assessments. So, what is the difference between an FBA and an FA? So, to start, a functional assessment, FA, a functional analysis involves the manipulation of variables to systematically identify antecedents and consequences as they relate to the function of a behavior, in which there are conditions to represent the 4 functions of behavior: escape, attention, access to tangibles, and sensory automatic, that are used to contrive potential opportunities for the behavior to occur that compared to a control or test condition, according to Alter in 2008. This method involves manipulating the environment in order to gather data-based evidence to determine what reinforcement is maintaining that behavior, to then determine what the function of that said behavior is. On the other hand, a functional behavior assessment, FBA, is a behavior assessment that includes both indirect measures such as interviews, rating scales, and archival reviews, and direct observations through descriptive summaries of behavioral patterns that are then analyzed by personnel with expertise in behavioral analysis to review multiple measures to draw summary hypothesis about what is occasioning and maintaining the problem behavior, according to Lewis in 2015. FBAs are conducted within the natural setting and are based on observations, so there is no manipulation of the environment. My organization, what do we use? My organization, as I mentioned previously, primarily conducts FBAs. Specifically, they do commonly conduct indirect assessments in the form of parent and stakeholder interviews, and the interviews of those that interact daily with the clients, and then direct assessments using ABC data collection. Again, up until last month, I had only ever heard of one FA being conducted within my clinic in the last few years. Until I had the opportunity to participate in one. The one I got to participate in was the Interview Informed Synthesized Contingency Analysis, or the ISCA. BCBAs in my company have discussed that they have previously conducted FAs at other companies. However, it is far less common at my own current fieldwork site. So when to use an FA versus an FBA? Although both indirect and direct measures within an FA and FBA can be appropriate for addressing these problem behaviors, there are times when one is more appropriate than the other. Remember, the difference between a functional analysis and the aforementioned direct and indirect descriptive method is that descriptive methods, or FBAs, establish a correlation between the behavior and antecedent or consequence variables, whereas a functional analysis identifies the causal relationships, according to Alter in 2008. So you would use an FA then, typically for the most part, if you are really trying to determine what 100% of the function of the behavior is. So it's considered more valid than an FBA, as it provides a tangible, concrete evidence for the function of behavior. However, it is more time consuming and requires more training for staff. If a problem behavior that has received behavior intervention services previously has become more severe, has really changed in intensity or topography, has not responded to previous antecedent or consequence interventions, and is increasingly hindering the learner's learning, then an FA would be most applicable. And again, you will know with almost 100% certainty that that is the function of the behavior. If a problem behavior is less severe, has recently started occurring with lower frequency and magnitude, duration, and data can be taken continuously across different people and environments, then an FBA may be more appropriate. Additionally, an FBA should primarily be used in schools, as an FA's application is limited in schools due to lack of personnel with expertise to design and implement trials, the time involved in conducting multiple trial configurations, and the need for sophisticated direct observation data collection across trials, according to Lewis in 2015. So, for the purpose of my own fieldwork application, I've chosen the FBA as the most common used at my placement site. So the FBA components within my organization. So the assessment of the focus is the FBA. Given my organization's more frequent experience with it, that's why I've chosen it. In practice, information for FBAs is gathered using a combination of both indirect and direct descriptive assessments, according to Alter in 2008. So what are indirect assessments? Indirect assessments are those that do not need observation of the learner, which includes interviews with parents, teachers, and children via the use of questionnaires, rating scales, and record reviews. Again, according to Alter in 2008. What are direct assessments then? This is the next step after the indirect assessments. Assessments that involve observation of the learner by using scatter plots and observation worksheets that reflect a running narrative of antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, ABCs, in the natural setting. Again, Alter 2008. So what does this look like? First step, number one, is the BCBA obtains consent from parents. We want to make sure the stakeholders are a part of this and have given us consent to participate in this assessment. The next step then is the BCBA conducts informal, indirect assessments that typically include interviews with parents, practitioners that work directly with the client, and others who come in contact with the learner every day. This could be other disciplines, this could be teachers, basically anyone who sees this child on a daily basis. We have a set of resources to choose from, of course not limited to, but the QABF, the motivation assessment scale, the MAS, and the FAST. These will all actually be listed in the upcoming slides as well. Data collection is through then direct assessment after we've completed these indirect assessments, and we have looked a lot at ABC data. Once this ABC data is collected, then we can go on to the final step, which is the analysis of the data. So behavior data is graphed and analyzed by BCBA. This information is then used to determine potential reinforcers maintaining problem behavior and hypothesize the function of the behavior. Again, it's just a hypothesis because it's an FBA. This information is then used to determine an appropriate replacement behavior for the target behavior and begin developing a formal behavior intervention plan for the client. So This first one that I have here is the QABF, questions about behavioral function. In this one, you will give it to the stakeholder, in which they talk about the client's name and residence. You write down their name, and in this one, you already have a target behavior in mind, potentially, in which case they can answer these questions related to the target behavior above, in which they can do does not apply, never applies, rarely applies, sometimes applies, or often applies. Next one we have is the motivation assessment scale. Again, the behaviors are listed above along with the client and the setting that these behaviors belong in. So this is a client stakeholder at home. They might say like in the home setting and can answer these questions relating to if they never see it or always see it behavior. And then at the end, we kind of transfer these scores to kind of see if any of these seem to, from the get-go, line up with one of the four main functions of behavior. The next one we have is the functional analysis screening tool, or the FAST, in which case the client is filled out again, the informant and the interviewer ask questions. In this one, we kind of talk more about potential problem behaviors. This might be a more descriptive list, and we answer, again, similar yes, no, not available questions, and then score at the end, those four functions of behavior. And here we have the ABC observation form. For the ABC observation board, we have the activity, the time, the antecedent, the behavior description, the consequence, and the number of occurrences for a behavior that might be more frequent. So how long does this process take? At my current site, in my experiences, the behavior assessment process from beginning to end can vary in time. Typically, it lasts at least a month, if not longer, depending on uptake consent, filling out indirect assessments, direct observations, and then analysis of results. Conclusion. So what would I like to know more about? Personally, I would like to learn more about conducting FAs, specifically in the direct assessment itself. Given my experiences previously only been with the ISCA and with using the ISCA application on an iPhone for measuring behaviors within each condition, I would like to research more on other FAs and how data is collected for the different variations. You'll note these are in my questions later from my fellow classmates. How did the assessments conducted in your field experience placement compare to what you have learned in your coursework? The assessments in my field experience have greatly mirrored what I have learned in my coursework, which I have found to be incredibly beneficial when it comes to the direct application of the literature into practice. I'm able to use the terms, setup, and procedures, as well as historical research on its use to my clients in real time, which helps in my breadth of understanding and making the assessments, particularly the FBA, included with my scope of competence. Finally, I have my questions for my fellow students. So for those whose fieldwork is in the clinical setting, much like my own, are FBAs or FAs more commonly run, or both? I just know my experience. I don't know if it's unique, in which we don't run a lot of FAs, or in which like other clinical settings run FAs, or if that is something that is pretty common across clinics. So my second question is, if you have participated in an FBA in your clinical setting, do your steps mirror the steps my clinic takes during the assessment process? Are your steps very similar? Does the timetable about the same? I just want to know a little bit more. For those working in the school setting, I would love to hear more about how the FBA process is conducted, given I have learned that FAs are not typically conducted there. For indirect assessments, what surveys, interviews, tools, etc., do you provide caregivers in order to get that foundational information? For direct assessments, it is primarily a BCBA who takes anecdotal data, or do other staff members, such as teachers, paraprofessionals, special education teachers, take part in the data collection process as well? Last, I have my resources listed here. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I am looking forward to hearing my classmates' responses to my questions, as well as being able to watch some videos going forward as well. Thanks so much.